Hello, and welcome to the Pulse of Jonesboro. I am Jeremy Terrell, and I am your host, and thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about some things that have gone on in Jonesboro related to Tim Griffin and his department in the state, and some of the things that I learned from an event I went to last week. I think it's good information for you guys to know, and just one of those things that we need to be aware of as a community to make sure that we're also paying attention to what may be going on within our own city. I think KIT maybe covered a couple of these things briefly, but we have a tendency to kind of give information and then move right on past it, and I get why they do that, but I do believe that this is some serious information, and people need to be aware of what's going on. So I'm going to cover a couple of those things, and then I'm also going to get into what I believe is going on within Jonesboro. You can say the right, the left, you can say the political climate, you can say whatever you want to, but I want to kind of talk a little bit about why one side looks at it from this point of view and another side looks at it from this point of view, and then see maybe if there's ever a common ground that could be worked on. Because right now it's like us versus them, and I don't think it needs to be that. And of course, this podcast is more about shining light on some of the things that we believe is injustice as far as what the community is getting versus what they believe they should be getting. And I want to talk a little bit about that and shine a little bit of a light on some of that stuff. So let's get into it today. One of the things that Tim Griffin was talking about, I got it pulled up here on the computer here. We had a bust earlier this year for human trafficking, and it was at a Chinese massage parlor. There's 23 victims, and they were brought over from China. They actually came through the southern border for the most part of what was told, and were to report New York or somewhere up there. And when they got there, they were distributed throughout the United States. A lot of these places were for these massage parlors, and we had one of them here in Jonesboro. Thanks to Tim Griffin, I believe he worked with some local groups, we ended up getting rid of this and out of our city. I believe the guy that was in charge of it, looks like he was currently living in Oklahoma. He had a business in Hot Springs, and anyways, he would bring Chinese people and to work off their whatever to get here, they had to be human trafficked. Super sad situation, but these 23 victims were all rescued, all Chinese nationals, and it's a great thing. But that was happening here right in our backyard in Jonesboro, Arkansas. One of the other things is they did a huge bust on organized retail crime. Now, this is kind of the new mega crime within shopping centers and things like that. And, they change barcodes. They do all kinds of stuff within these organized groups. And this is, from what Tim Griffin said, this is heavily organized throughout the nation. And Jonesboro has one of these things. And that just means we're, for a long time we were, whether we just didn't know and stuff like this was going on, or it's now happening in our city. I'm not 100% sure what that is, but nevertheless, it's happening in Jonesboro. And they busted 16. So 16 arrests in this organized retail crime. And that's big because you guys have heard me say maybe in other episodes that, and maybe when I was running for mayor, that we got a huge problem with people coming in from out of the city and within the city and going into our retail places and stealing a bunch of stuff constantly. And that's probably a huge major crime in Jonesboro and across the United States. And it's great to see that this was taken care of. Now, does that mean others won't come in and probably fill those spots? I would believe so, but if we continue to break down these organizations and hold them accountable, usually they'll find a different area that's softer on crime and stuff like that. So, shout out to Tim Griffin and his bunch. I'm glad he's doing a great service to us here in Jonesboro and throughout the state. And hopefully he continues to do a great job. And I do believe he's up for election this next go around. And not that I'm shouting, I'm not endorsing him or anything right now. And I don't know if I'll ever endorse on this podcast, but he does do a great job in a lot of ways. So the other thing I want to talk about is, I'll talk about sidewalks, and other people talk about sidewalks in a negative context. And then the people that are pro sidewalks, they get mad at us and they're like, sidewalks are great. What do you have with sidewalks? And it's not the sidewalks per se. It is all the other stuff that's being neglected, and we're putting in a ton of sidewalks. I think that's the disconnect between those that are pro sidewalk and those that are not pro sidewalk. And it's not that I don't want sidewalks. I absolutely believe that sidewalks are a necessity in a town the size of ours. I greatly believe that all the schools should be surrounded by blocks and blocks, coming out from schools. They need to have sidewalks. Our junior highs, tons of kids walk. And some of our elementaries, they walk home, and they all need to be protected and have the safety that is needed for them to get from school to home and back. So pro sidewalk, 100%. We have areas within Jonesboro that walk a lot, and they need to be provided sidewalks. The problem that we have, those that you would see getting aggravated about, 6 foot, 7 foot airway strips, whatever, people call them all kinds of different stuff. The aggravation that comes is there's a lot of things being neglected while we do a ton of work on these sidewalks. And we are constantly negotiating with homeowners and things to try to buy their land and take their land for these huge sidewalks. And I've read things where, I love it when somebody passes me, there's plenty of room, there's not awkwardness, whatever. And that may be, and that's great. Lord forbid if we had actual, human contact. But anyways, so it's not the sidewalks. So those that are on one side or the other, let's understand that when a group says, my gosh, can we quit putting up these sidewalks? It doesn't mean we don't want sidewalks. It means we want roads that we can drive up and down that don't beat us up. We want, intersections and infrastructure where it's easy to get to work and, safer on cars. And there's just a lot of things that we want better. The priority is not a sidewalk for us. And it seems like on the other side, the sidewalks pro people are way more concerned about sidewalks than they are about streets. We keep hearing that we've got more money in the coffer to do more streets than we ever have before. Well, that's good, but what are we doing with it? And are we using it? Is it in the general fund? Are we using it for roads or sidewalks or other things? And, it's one of these crazy things that people get fixated on, and somebody tells them something and they hear it and they just run with it, and they're just convicted by it and kind of have tunnel vision or whatever. And I feel like that's what's kind of going on with the direction that our current administration in Jonesboro has taken us, and that is they're tunnel visioned on what that looks like. Then there's, this outside group that are like, oh my gosh, can we just cover the basics first and then worry about sidewalks? And I don't think that our budget is so large or so vast or so great that we can ignore roads, which, a matter of fact, I know it's not, because we're out here trying to, right now, get a master plan on roads. We had a master plan, I think it was either 17 or 18, 2017, 2018. And I don't know if we just abandoned it. I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you that as far as the last 2 years, the amount of roads that have been resurfaced or whatever worked on is minuscule compared to what is needed. But we are putting up tons of sidewalks and doing other things instead of taking care of roads. And so I wanted to read real quick the primary responsibilities of city government. And these are normally providing essential services like public safety, police and fire, maintaining infrastructure, that's roads, water, sanitation, managing community development, that's zoning, building, and codes, and promoting economic development. They also handle local laws, manage public health, and address citizens' concerns. And so if you break this down, number one is safety, police and fire. I think, again, we can argue this and discuss this. Our policemen and our firemen are fantastic. I mean, we've got dedicated, true blue servants, and the majority of them are there to do just that, to serve the people of Jonesboro. And they do everything that they can. They really do. They put forth the best effort. And, is there problems in some of those areas? Absolutely. You guys have heard me talk about those, and they need to be addressed. But all in all, and if you do a poll, what's the number one priority? It is safety. It always has been in Jonesboro. And so the next one is maintaining infrastructure. So it doesn't say building new infrastructure. The first couple of primary responsibilities for a city: maintaining infrastructure, roads, water, and sanitation. So if that's number two, and we've got roads where people, I've posted some roads that are literally falling apart in certain subdivisions, literally falling apart. Drive up, we're putting something on Jefferson, a big runway strip, and I'm going to call them all kinds of things because people get really mad. I don't know why, but it is huge, and it does have a yellow stripe down it. So, but they're putting one down Jefferson to connect Jefferson with G Street. That's great, but if you drive up and down Washington or Jefferson or Matthews, you're going to hit tons and tons of potholes and tons of potholes that have been fixed. The road crew does what they can, but when you got a mile stretch and you're putting in 20 pothole repairs, it feels like gravel road. You would think that you're off-roading in some aspects. Contrary to what anybody says, that's not what the majority of the people of Jonesboro want. But I promise you. Just look at the comments on anything that's posted, pro sidewalk, not pro sidewalk. It's always about the roads. It is. And that's the majority of the comments back is roads. And we ignore the roads. I went to the city council meeting yesterday or this week, and we're going to hire another person to tell us a master plan about our roads. We're going to spend, I don't even remember what it was, $800,000 to get a master plan for our roads. It's like, I know the story I'm about to tell you to be true, and I've said it before on another episode. They have put up a board, and they had the streets labeled out, and they had them all graded, and it was A, B, C, D, E, F, or maybe it was to D. I'm not 100% sure if it went all the way to F, but regardless, they were like, okay, which ones are we going to do? I think they have completely abandoned that. I don't even know what is going on with the roads. I don't know if there's a plan. I don't know what we're looking at. I don't know if I mean, we're going to do Patrick, I think it was, and we're going to do something else. We did Lawson, a little bit of work on Lawson, and I don't know if we're going to do Patrick, actually. I know that they're getting a sidewalk, but Patrick's road, I drove it not too long ago. There's tons of roads worse than Patrick. Tons of roads worse than Patrick. And that is number 2 on the responsibilities of our local government. Number 3 is managing community development. And we can argue whether they're doing a good job about this or not. I'm not like crazy aggravated about some of the things that they do. I am aggravated when they put a pizza parlor right next to somebody's house. I think that that's just atrocious. I think that that's, I don't care what plan, whoever made that plan is not real smart. So you can argue with me on that, whatever. But you can't put a pizza parlor, especially when there's property everywhere. Like if the plan is that we're going to build, try to make this, a place that people are going to shop and all this stuff and make it not a residential, why don't we start with the areas where there's open areas? Like, no, let's just bypass all of those areas and let's put it right beside somebody's house. That makes no sense. So common sense has sometimes left. Sometimes we force it here in Jonesboro. And there's plenty of areas that you'll drive around and look at, and we try to force something to happen instead of organically allowing it to happen, and it doesn't pan out for us too much sometimes, and that's bad. We don't want businesses opening and shutting down, and that happens regularly, but we want it to organically happen. We want growth to happen and be managed as it happens, and foresee it, of course, but not push it. And that's what we do sometimes. We push this growth. We push this, I don't care what people say. I just see it. There's so much push on, we've got to be better. We've got to be this. We've got to be that. And how do we bring in, more people that want better jobs and all this stuff? Like, the people are so consumed about how to build Jonesboro instead of just taking Jonesboro where it currently is right now and making it the best version of Jonesboro. I have talked to tons and tons and tons and tons of people about going to 100,000 people. You've heard me say this on an episode. I can tell you that the people that are moving in, we don't want. We want people that are moving here to get jobs, to be contributors to society. We don't want more people coming from areas that are deteriorating communities to come here and do the same thing that they did in those deteriorating communities, and that's nothing. So we want growth in a manner that is best for Jonesboro, but they don't care. They're missing it. Thank goodness the group, said no on this apartment complex that's trying to come in. And, hopefully in 6 months they'll say no again when it tries to happen. But it's not the growth that we're looking for. We can't be a community that is based on, destroying ourselves, basically, and people have said there needs to be moratoriums on lots of different things, and there absolutely 100% should be. And we need to enforce, certain things that we have that we don't enforce. Slumlords. It's funny. I kind of went back and listened to some of the promises that were given, during the mayor's race, and with the exception of sidewalks, I don't see anything that's happening that was promised. I don't. Maybe it's in the inner workings and we just don't see it yet. But I'm not 100% sure that we are moving in the direction that was promised. I know some of the things that were promised to me personally aren't getting done. But, what they do is they just try to hopefully we forget. Hopefully we don't hold them accountable, and it just goes away. But so this is a big deal to me. This is crazy big deal to me. And I think that we need to understand why some of us are feeling this way, and the ones that are so pro sidewalk need to understand why we are feeling this way. So that's kind of my take on, the one side versus the other. And, like people on Jefferson, I was there when they were kind of doing some work on Jefferson. And I think I told you this a couple of episodes. The guy that lives on Jefferson is so aggravated that they're taking out good sidewalk, because the sidewalk running towards Jefferson between Main Street, for the most part, was in good condition. And all the side roads and sidewalks are in horrible condition. But I've heard the mayor say we're making Jonesboro more connected. And again, you heard me say this on the last episode, they're forcing a walking community. I think they're taking a playbook out of Pete Buttigieg's, 15-minute cities. I really believe that that's what's going on. We hired a group out of Portland, Oregon. They're going to come and do, part of the planning. And it's like, I'm pretty positive that the majority of Jonesboro doesn't want anything to resemble Portland, Oregon. And I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. They may be good enough to come in and stay focused on what our community is, and really dive into and look into, what it should be and what it is and what the people want, and how do we get there. But, the history of Portland, Oregon over the last, 5 to 10 years is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. So hopefully that's not the direction that they're bringing over here. But it could be. I don't know. I think that's why this podcast and, people like Patty Lack and her 280 page and, NEA report and there's a lot of people that are out there doing some good stuff. But I think that this is why we're all so important, and hopefully there's more that grow and become intertwined with, what's going on within Jonesboro, so that we hold them accountable and we get them to understand what we want. I want to finish today with talking about the E. Boone Watson Center. So this is a place, it's on the north side of town. It's just right off of Matthews, like a block off of Matthews. And it was a center back in the day. And I think it was a school back in the day. Anyways, it was, it has been turned into a museum for the Black African-American population. There's a lot of pride there. Lots of that community really love this place and spend a lot of time here, and they can rent it for fairly inexpensively. And there's tradition and things like that have gone on at this place since it's opened. And since the Justice Department has been shut down, a section of this has been taken over by the displacement of some people that were over at the Justice Building. And I really believe that this is a bad deal. And hopefully some people showed up to the city council meeting and talked about this. Somebody let me know about this the other day, and I actually reached out to some of the city councilmen to talk about, this is bad. This is a bad deal, because what happens is we don't know. They say it's short term, could be 5 months or whatever, but the way that we move, it's kind of like June, the beginning of June, we were talking about the Justice Department. The beginning of June, and it's, we're a week or so away from September. And I believe the first part of September, insurance and some other people are going to go take a look at it and give some feedback on what's going on. This is, to me, is completely insane. So, to say that it's temporary and it's, maybe only 5 months, man, we move at a snail's pace in Jonesboro, like a snail's pace. sometimes I believe the snails are beating us. So, we were told we would have information, get a structural engineer out there within 2 weeks, 10 days, and that didn't happen. It's well past 2 weeks or 10 days. And maybe it did happen, but we haven't, as a community, we don't know. And I said that the E.B. Watson Center was going to be the last thing, but I'll probably finish with one other. But it's not right. There's people that had things planned, family reunions, things like that, at this center, and they've all been canceled. And now we don't know what's going to happen with it. I even heard rumors that they were talking about taking all of that stuff out of the museum side. There's 2 different sides, museum side and then like a area you can rent and stuff. But I was told that there's a possibility, and there has been talked about taking all that stuff and putting it in storage and then using that other section as well. It's bad. It's bad. So it's a museum. It's means a lot to certain people, and we need to respect that. So they got to figure something else out about that. It's 600-700 square feet that they're currently using. Surely we got 600 to 700 square feet somewhere else. If we don't, man, shame on us. But I just feel like we do, and we should use it. So we don't need to go to sleep on this. They can't even do tours. Like, they won't let people. There's whether it's stipulations from the state or whatever, you can't do tours. You can't come in. There's a guy there that's over that, and he can't give tours or anything, so nobody can even come in and check it out. But anyways, the other thing I want to finish with is I've done a lot of research on this, and you guys keep hearing me talk about the Justice Department and where the new E911 center should go. So I did some real numbers and went out and found out. So we bought the property over at let me pull this up here real quick, over for the sports complex. We bought that for $4 million. So that's 30 acres for $4 million. We also bought an additional 4 acres on top of that. So if you take 30 acres, if you take $4 million, divide it by 30 acres, that's $133,000 per acre. So this other property, and I think they've gotten it down now to 1.5 million divided by 4. That's $375,000 an acre. That's almost triple per acre. Triple. And nobody's scratching their head going, wait a minute, that doesn't seem like a good deal. That something seems wrong here. I mean, a few of the city council. So the city councils right now, I think, divided 6-6. So somebody on the city council needs to realize, number one, you shouldn't gouge the city. You shouldn't be able to gouge the city. And the guy was going to sell all 12 acres at one point in time. He was asking $2 million, and that's what he asked originally of us. It just doesn't look transparent. It just doesn't look right. And we haven't done any understanding. And this is what kills me, because it's not real difficult to get an average of understanding. They keep saying, well, we need to get an architect involved and this involved so that we know. Listen, I went out and found out how much it costs to do an overlay on roads. So it's somewhere between $175,000 and $220,000 per lane per mile. So let's just average it and say $200,000 per lane per mile is an overlay. That's what it costs. It doesn't take much to do some research and say, hey, a water retention pond costs this much, because we've done some and this is what they all cost. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. It just kills me that it's like, do they not want to do their job? Like, we know how much a brick wall costs. We know how much a road costs. We know all of this stuff because we've done it. We have done it. And nobody wants to sit down and put pen to paper and say, hey, they're right or they're wrong because these are the last 3 roads that we did and the estimate is this much. This is the cost. Or pick up the phone and call somebody that does this for a living and say, hey, what did your last, quarter of a mile road cost you with gutters and da-da-da-da-da? And then find out what it costs to build a retention pond. Those types of things. How much was your brick walls, your fence that you did last, or how much are bricks, and how many bricks do we need on a 4-acre brick wall? I mean, it's not rocket science. But we can't move as a city unless we get and pay somebody hundreds of thousands of dollars to tell us those informations. Like, you can't even get an average without paying somebody to tell you what it is. So we're going to hire an architect, or we have, and they're going to tell us that what they believe it should be at Caraway, or it should be downtown. And, this is the architect that we hire regularly as a city. So, I can just see it sitting in the mayor's office and, hey, Mayor, where do you want this? Well, I want this on Caraway. I want to spend the taxpayers' money, I would say the property and then all the infrastructure alone, I would say a minimum, and this is just me doing research, I would say a minimum of $3.5 million extra on top of buying the land, with the land. I would say that we're 3.5 million when you talk about all the infrastructure that needs to be done, all the dirt work, retention pond, all the requirements that this guy is asking that wants to sell us the property. Huge amount. Road, new access, easements, blah, 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 blah. All of that stuff. We don't have any of that stuff except for a retention pond downtown. So, but I can see them having that conversation, and they're like, well, we probably can make that happen in our report. But not to take into account, because the architect, they're getting paid to do a job for the mayor. It should be, how cost effective is it? It shouldn't be anything but how cost effective is it at this place and how cost effective it is at this place. That's it. There shouldn't be any other discussion, because it's taxpayers' money. Who cares if it's a mile apart from one another? Who cares? Nobody should care that it's downtown versus uptown. And the strategic planning people said, put it downtown. And we're ignoring that. Man, we want to listen to the strategic plan until we don't agree with the strategic plan. And then we want a new strategic plan. That's the way it goes. And then we're going to spend years of my money on a new strategic plan because we didn't like the old strategic plan that we spent lots and thousands of dollars on until we get what we want. They play with yours and my money like it's theirs, and it's endless. And it's not. So that's my rant for the day. Guys, have a great week. Again, share this video, watch this video, like this video. We thank you so much for continued support, and we're continuing to grow. And we got some great stuff coming up. And we look forward to some interviews for some candidates that are coming due to some work and some family and some other stuff. We're going to push that one down the road a little bit before we air anything and recording things. But we are going to do some candidates here real soon. And we got some good stuff coming up towards the end of the year. Really exciting stuff that's a little nerve-wracking, but it's going to be great for our community. So tune in, share, and have a blessed and wonderful week.